Hi, everyone. Jeff Toyster here, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Brad Cleveland. You should know who Brad Cleveland is, and just in case you don't, he is a contact center and customer experience consultant and an author. He's an author. This is now, Brad, the fourth edition of Contact Center Management on Fast Forward. Is it the fourth edition already?
It is the fourth edition. It dates me a little bit.
Well, I'm sure that the last few were just a couple of years ago.
It's just
If
just a few.
if you've not seen this book already, this is an exceptional resource for anyone working in and managing a contact center. It's been a number of years since I managed a contact center. I wish I had this book back then. It would have made life so much easier. And today, Brad and I are going to talk about one specific aspect of contact center management that's very important to me, but I think tricky, and that's staffing. How do we balance the need between having the right number of people and also that imperative to keep costs as low as possible? So just before we get started, Brad, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
You bet, Jeff. I'm doing great, and thank you so much. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, and such an honor to be speaking with you. I've benefited so much from your work over the years, so thanks for having me on here.
Oh, you bet. And so I want to start with a very briefly a broad overview of the book before we dive into the specific topic, scheduling, and especially now that you have a fourth edition out. Who is this book for? Who's the target audience, and what are they going to gain from this book?
Yeah, great question. So, and the first edition, this will definitely date me, was 1997. So it's been out there for a while, and it's reached corners of the profession and our incredibly exciting, contact center space in ways that we never envisioned before that first edition came out. So we're excited to have it out there, and the intent is for it to be a resource for anyone who's handling customer facing work that's primarily customer initiated. So it's primarily for inbound contact centers, and contact in the broadest sense of the term, which is today any channel. Text, video is coming into the mix. Social media has made big inroads into contact centers. And of course, the phone calls, which aren't going to go away anytime soon. So it's really for anyone that manages an inbound contact center and wants to get service right. They want to, our hope is that the contact center fades into the background and they can get on with building their brand and really connecting with their customers. So that's the hope.
And I can speak from experience, and I'm saying this more to people who might be watching or listening to this. I've read the book, and again, I've been very impressed. It's an incredibly practical resource. It's not theoretical. It's nuts and bolts. And that's one of the topics we're diving into today, is a nuts and bolts scheduling topic. And I want to ask a question from the customer perspective, which is, when I call a company, so we'll talk about phone for just a moment. When I call a company for customer service, why can't I get a live person on the phone right away?
That's a great question, and one that as customers we have all asked probably many times. And I feel that continues to be a great opportunity for organizations, just be accessible. It doesn't take that many more resources, and often saves you money and resources if you're accessible and customers trust that. Ironically, Jeff, when they can get through to a live person, they're more willing to use self-service. Like, all right, you guys are doing your part, let me do my part and see how easy we can make this. But to answer your question, I think there's a perception that if we make it that much more difficult up front, then customers might just revert to some other method of getting what they need, and that's not going so well for a lot of organizations.
Wait, so you're saying something I think is a little surprising to me, and might be surprising to some of the people that are listening to this, that making it easier to get to a live person. I know we for legal reasons often have to have that recording. This call may be recorded, but after that, getting someone quickly to a live person is going to save us money or increase revenue. Is that what you're saying?
It often saves us money, even in non-revenue environments. We're discovering and have discovered over the years. Why? Because our customers trust the process more. It tends to impact repeat work. It tends to impact their expectation of, should I even try to make this interaction, and how willing am I to be a partner in sharing with this organization information that would help them improve products and services and processes. Just having better accessibility in so many ways creates a better experience. And out of that better experience, we tend to find the sweet spot in balancing costs and really creating the kind of strategic value that we have the chance to find and discover and to really build out in our customer facing environments.
So to do that, to be accessible, you have to have, I imagine, higher staffing levels. And I'm sure that makes a lot of executives cringe. More people means more expense. And particularly, for example, in retail, we're having this conversation in December. And for retailers, I expect maybe higher levels of customer service needs, which means higher levels of staffing. But those are expensive costs. What are some of the dangers, maybe the obvious ones, but perhaps the not so obvious dangers of not having enough people, aside from not being able to answer the phone quickly?
Yeah, if you don't have enough people, some of the obvious implications are long waits for customers, and a lot of parallel channel use. So I'm in queue, I can't get through in this channel, I'll try some other alternative and see what gets me the quickest response. Or I may bail out of one channel altogether, and then we've got multiple contacts going. And from an internal perspective, it's more costly to try to manage parallel contacts and channel switching and all of the things that we as customers tend to be encouraged to do if we can't get through very easily. So there is a cost of staffing correctly, but there is a cost of not staffing correctly, and we've got to look at the balance of both the pros and cons of not getting it right. And often we find, Jeff, it doesn't take a lot of additional resources. A lot of organizations are pretty close to what they need. Maybe it's a matter of timing. Maybe it's using those resources better. So executives might picture adding a lot of cost and resources. That's often not really the case.
So there's a couple of things here I want to really get into. One is just the point that you're making. As a customer, I've been guilty of this myself. I'm waiting on the phone. I'm also going to go to social media because I'm tired of waiting, and I'm going to open a chat session, and I might email. So now, instead of engaging one person, I'm engaging 4 people in the same contact center. And I imagine the biggest cost driver in the contact center today is probably people. So I hadn't even thought about that in terms of that wait time is consuming more resources than we see. But something else that's interesting that you said is we might not need to add as many more resources as we think. So from a practical standpoint, for someone listening in or watching us today, what are a couple of things you can do to just use the resources you have more effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it starts with something that maybe doesn't get a lot of thought when you think about scheduling, but how do we structure our groups? So if I'm one of your employees, am I cross-trained as broadly as I can be? Can I handle multiple channels? The further we can go with cross-training and being able to handle the breadth of the way our customers want to interact with us, we're going to be more efficient. We're going to be structured in a way that scales better from the get-go. So I see the mistake all the time of organizations trying to, especially if they've got turnover or they got new hires, like, oh, we'll just train them on this service here. But then the customer gets through, hey, well, I've got you. There's one more thing I need to run by you. And oh my goodness, now it's a transferred call and resources start multiplying on us. So having a good group structure is a base, it's blocking and tackling, get the structure right. And then you'll use the calculations, Erlang C, which sounds kind of wonky, but that queuing formula or computer simulation, use the resources that are out there to make sure you're calculating base staff requirements. We don't want too many. We don't want too few. We want just the right amount. So get that right. And then look at the scheduling alternatives that exist. There are so many that, can be potentially very helpful in getting the right resources in place. So that's a very creative part of this, and can be a lot of fun. Get your agents involved. You'll come up with some good ways to use the resources you have in the most effective way possible.
And I like what you're saying about giving yourself flexibility. For example, cross training. One thing I'll add to that is what I see as a common mistake, particularly in smaller contact centers, is they do that, yet they don't give agents the opportunity to focus. In other words, they'll have people answer emails in between phone calls, and it feels like I'm doing a better job of using my resources. And the reality is I'm probably taking longer on each call because I'm mentally transitioning and I'm not creating rapport. So, I'm adding a few seconds to each call. And then I'm also adding processing time to each email because I'm probably halfway through the email when I get the call and I have to go back and read the email again. What I found in my own experiments, I don't know if you've replicated this yourself, but if we separate those queues, I'm just doing phone calls or I'm just doing one contact at a time, productivity goes up and quality goes up at the same time. Have you found something similar in terms of using resources but still giving people a chance to focus on one type of contact at a time?
Yes, absolutely. And when I refer to cross training, it's not so that we're handling different channels from one contact to the next to the next. It's so that as we look at the breadth of a week and a month, I can take Jeff Toyster and know that he's available here, or here. He's going to have that skill set to be able to help us out as the workflow ebbs and flows. So cross training is a toolkit for us. But you're exactly right. Switching work types, interaction by interaction, I've never seen that work very well. So, maybe a block of work in the morning, and maybe that looks a little different in the afternoon when the customer facing demand in one channel starts to fall off and another becomes more important.
So I want to switch to, we've talked a lot about phones, and I want to switch to some of these other channels that are very important, but sometimes I feel don't get the attention they deserve. So email, chat, text or SMS, social media. And some of the research that I've seen suggests that contact centers are generally forecasting and adjusting their schedule for anticipated phone volume, but not as many contact centers are doing the same thing for other channels. And before I go further, I wonder, have you seen the same thing? And if so, why do you suppose that's not happening?
Yeah, I think it's historical precedent that phone's been the dominant channel, but we absolutely have to do just as robust of a job in forecasting and staffing, planning for these other channels, or for the reasons you described a little bit ago. If you don't get through in this channel, you're going to start looking at other ways to get through. So I think there's some history that pulls at us a little bit. As soon as we can get our heads around the fact that, hey, these are these are omni-channel centers that we're managing, and any channel is as important, or it's going to start pulling at us and creating problems. We'll be better off. We just get our heads around that and plan accordingly.
Do you find that the nuts and bolts of trying to forecast and schedule effectively for, let's say, email or chat, is that a different process fundamentally than forecasting and scheduling for phone? Or do you apply the same basic techniques?
The same basic techniques with just one comment on a broad brushstroke. There are two basic types of interactions, and one are those that we have to handle at the time. So they're expressed as service level, and we've got a staff for those in a way that ensures we've got the right people at just the right time. And the other bucket of work is response time, expressed as response time. And that's that work that can be deferred. So generally email is going in the response time bucket, calls, video, text is going in the service level bucket. With that differentiation, the underlying principles are very similar. We look for patterns, look for external drivers. What are we doing internally to create workload? All the things that go into forecasting are very similar from one channel to the next.
Do you find, generally speaking, and I know every contact center is going to have a different set of circumstances, but in general, does each channel have kind of its own traffic pattern, or do spikes happen in the same time of day typically? And the reason I'm asking this is going back to your comment earlier about cross training. Is if I know, hey, first thing Monday morning, I'm bombarded with phone calls, but I don't really get a lot of emails until midday, for example, I can anticipate shifting people. But if I'm bombarded with emails and phone calls, I don't have the ability to do that other than defer the email work. Do you find that they have their own unique pattern, or do they all kind of come in a similar way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We find that general busy times for one channel seem to be the general busy times for another. So we get a lot of email on Monday morning. We get a lot of calls on Monday morning. The advantage of email is that we can defer it. So if we've got reasonable response time objectives and we set the right expectations with our customers, they get that auto reply that we will respond by close of business or by close of next business day or within 4 hours or whatever makes sense. We're seeing those objectives go up and up, which is exciting and interesting to see. But if we set reasonable expectations and meet them, then even deferring that work, a few hours can buy us the time that we need to really manage that service level bucket. So in general, the patterns are pretty similar. They're different. They're always somewhat different. But the general busy times for one channel tends to look similar for another channel. And that really goes back to we've got to make sure we really understand that work that has to happen at the time, and we're realistic about that work that's building up and queuing, or it'll turn into service level work. If we don't get back to email quickly enough, it's going to become a phone call.
So I'm a big fan of low hanging fruit, and one of the things I wanted to make sure I ask you is, I know you spend a lot of time working with contact centers and helping them work with these types of issues. Is there something you can point to that in most contact centers, the people who be tuning in, for example, could probably do today that would improve their ability to kind of balance the need to keep costs at an appropriate level, but still schedule so that they're there when their customers need them?
Yeah, great question. And quality is one of the best ways. It is one of it. It is so fundamental. I hate to even say it, rank it or try to put it in some priority order. Quality is absolutely fundamental to maintaining a good service level. So person by person, I have got to do a great job with this interaction that I'm handling right now. Get it done cleanly, front to back. So there's no confidence issue on the part of our customer. So there's no data integrity issues, something that was missed and it turns into a repeat call. So quality is huge, and make that, priority number one. And then I have seen just tremendous results in bringing our agents into inviting them to collaborate with us and getting the right resources in place at the right time. That's not just a workforce management responsibility. That is really a team sport effort. What do I understand as one of your employees about the nature of the workflow and my role in handling it? The power of one, the impact of each agent on service level is tremendous if you start looking at the underlying numbers. So I think creating a more collaborative environment can be very helpful and really create that why. Why do schedules look the way they do? Why is timing so important? Being in the right places at the right time, and just establishing that understanding across the board can be so helpful. So those are a couple of ideas.
So, Brad, I know we're running out of time. I really appreciate on a personal level that we did not get into any math today. But I'll go back to your book. I think for people tuning in, you give a lot of examples and practical tips and tools for people who really need to get into that scheduling math in the book. So the book is Contact Center Management on Fast Forward. If people want to find the book, or more important, I think, find you, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah. So thanks for that, Jeff. By the way, on math, I was never real great at it, which has been a huge help in my career because like if I can figure it out, then anybody can figure it out. And how do we put this in a way that's understandable? So that's one of those ironies that's been very helpful to me. I coming up through school and college and all that, I never put myself in any more of the math classes than I had to, and it's been something I've learned to enjoy. And the thing that helps me is picturing the reality behind the scenes. You know, we're talking about people, we're talking about occupancy, we're talking about customer waits, and you know, I like to envision, you really picture what's happening out there. What's that feel like if you're a customer? What's that busyness feel like if you're an agent? So you say the word math, it can be scary. It doesn't have to be. So, and thank you. The best way to reach me is bradcleveland.com. Is go to the website, and there's all kinds of alternatives there for connecting, and I'd love to do that.
Well, Brad, it's been a pleasure. It's been a treat for me to get to pick your brain about staffing and balancing the tension between quality and cost. So thanks for sharing so much valuable information today. I appreciate it.
You bet, Jeff. Thanks again, and thanks for the great work you're doing.